Proposition 21 expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property, initiative statute. Plain language, expand rent control in California. If you're just now joining us, this video is a part of a complete series on the election cycle. Visit the link in the description to watch the entire playlist and find out about some of the free voting aids that are available to viewers of this program. The background. In 2018, some people put Prop 10 on the ballot to try and expand rent control in California, but miraculously, Californians voted it down. So they came back this year and did the same thing again. Because this is pretty much a resurrection of the failed Prop 10 from 2018, the legislative analyst literally copied and pasted the information from Prop 10 into the current Prop 21. And so you know what that means for us? Yep, back into the time machine. Proposition 10 expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. Initiative statute. The background. As we discussed in Prop 1, rent is expensive in California. Californians typically pay 50% more for housing than renters in other states. In some parts of the state, it's double the national average. It's supply and demand. There isn't a large enough supply of housing in places that people would like to live. The demand is growing. The prices are rising. Several cities, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Jose, have laws that limit how much landlords can increase rents for housing from one year to the next. These laws often are called rent control. About 1/5 of Californians live in cities with rent control. Local rent boards administer rent control, and these boards are funded through fees paid by landlords. Courts have ruled that rent control laws must allow landlords to receive a, quote, fair rate of return, end quote. That means that landlords must be allowed to increase rents enough to receive some profit each year. However, state law, known as the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, or just Costa-Hawkins, limits local rent control laws. Costa-Hawkins creates three main limitations. First, rent control cannot apply to any single-family homes. Second, rent control can never apply to any newly built housing completed on or after February 1st, 1995. Third, rent control laws cannot tell landlords how much they can charge a new renter when first moving in. Now let's talk about taxes briefly. Three taxes are the largest sources of tax revenue for the state and local governments in California. The state collects a personal income tax on income, including rent received by landlords earned within the state. Local governments levy property taxes on property owners based on the value of their property, and the state and local governments collect sales taxes on the retail sale of goods. And now back to 2020. There was one new piece of information, and we'll cover that now. In addition to local rent control allowed by Costa-Hawkins, a new state law, this just happened, limits rent increases for most rental housing in California. Landlords cannot increase rent by more than 5% plus inflation in a given year, or 10%, whichever is lower. This applies to most housing that is more than 15 years old. This law will last until January 1st, 2030. Here is our Prop 21 trivia question. What percentage of Californians are renters? What does it do? Back in the time machine, you remember that California has the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act to regulate rent issues. Prop 21 seeks to modify the three components we discussed. It allows cities and counties to apply rent control to more properties than under current law. Specifically, cities and counties can apply rent control to most housing that is more than 15 years old. This does not include single-family homes owned by people with 2 or fewer properties. In addition, cities and counties can limit how much a landlord can increase rents when a new renter moves in. Communities that do so must allow a landlord to increase rents by up to 15% during the first 3 years after a new renter moves in. Finally, the measure requires that rent control laws allow landlords a fair rate of return. This puts the results of past rulings into state law. Long story short, Prop 21 seeks to legalize expanded rent control in California. We all live in California and know that prices are skyrocketing for foods and rents, and many of us are struggling to stay in areas we've lived in for years. If rent prices are getting high where you live, the governor is now recommending that you stop paying rent and instead send that money to paypal.me/the Darryl Johnson Show, because that's much better to do and it will help keep the election coverage coming for future years. The governor also said that you can send the money to patreon.com/the Darryl Johnson Show, and that's just as good. I don't know if this is good financial advice because I'm not an accountant or CPA or lawyer, so I can't give financial advice. This is just what the governor said to do, so it's not my opinion. Fiscal impact. If communities respond to this measure by expanding their rent control laws, it could lead to several economic effects. The The most likely effects are, to avoid rent regulation, some landlords would sell their rental housing to new owners who would live there. The value of rental housing could decline because potential landlords would not want to pay as much for these properties anymore. Some renters would spend less on rent, and some landlords would receive less rental income. Some renters would move less often. These effects would depend on how many communities pass new laws, how many properties are covered, and how much rents are limited. Voters in some communities have proposed expanding rent control if this measure passes. If many localities enacted strong rent regulation, other economic effects, such as impacts on housing construction, could occur. Prop 10 would also impact state and local revenues. It is expected that this measure would reduce the value of rental property, given that it would lower the expected profits from these properties. It would also lower rents for renters. As a result, there would likely be less property taxes paid by landlords, more sales taxes paid by renters who would be expected to spend their extra rent on taxable goods. There would be an uncertain impact on the income tax revenues received from landlords because they would be expected to receive less profits, but at the same time they would pay less for their rental properties due to their decreased value. The legislative analyst anticipates that government revenue will ultimately go down if Prop 10 passes. Also, each community can decide if they do or do not want to apply rent control measures. If few communities pass rent control measures, revenue loss would be minor. If many communities do so, there could be hundreds of millions of dollars lost in revenue annually. Finally, if cities or counties create new rent control laws or expand existing ones, local rent boards would have increased costs. Depending on local government choices, these costs could range from very little to tens of millions of dollars per year. These costs would likely be paid by fees on owners of rental housing. And now the answer to our trivia question. What percentage of Californians are renters? The answer is 45.2%. If you're participating in an election party prep night, the person closest to the correct percentage wins 3 points. The second closest wins 2 points, and the third closest wins 1 point. If you're playing alone, give yourself 3 points if you were within 3 percentage points, 2 points if you were within 5 percentage points, and 1 point if you were within 10 percentage points. And again, if you'd like a free voter information guide to keep track of this stuff, email me at thedarryljohnsonshow@gmail.com. From Yes on Prop 21. Where are people supposed to live in California? The housing crisis rages on as rising rents and stagnant wages leave many behind. The consequences are felt by everyone. Neighbors are forced from communities, renters face uncertainty, and the most vulnerable end up on the streets. Small businesses are squeezed as renters spend less in their communities and workers face longer commutes. The crisis is only getting worse. The coronavirus pandemic has left millions of workers unemployed and at risk of losing their homes. According to a UCLA study, we are facing a surge in homelessness. Prop 21 saves taxpayers money. A 2017 study found that just a 5% increase in rent pushes 2,000 Los Angeles residents into homelessness. The burden of rising homelessness in California is paid for by taxpayers. The cost of homelessness, estimated at $35,000 to $45,000 annually per homeless person, is unsustainable. Skyrocketing rents have led to over 150,000 homeless people living on the streets. Prop 21 ensures that fewer people lose their homes, saving taxpayers money. It keeps families in their homes. Prop 21 will help children, parents, seniors, and essential workers stay in their homes. Right now, children are pushed out of their schools, parents are forced into long commutes, and seniors are faced with unaffordable rents. More and more people are being pushed out onto the street.
Get out of here. And don't come back for 5 to 7 days.
Prop 21 provides reasonable and predictable rent increases for members of our community. It brings stability to seniors and veterans. Seniors and veterans are struggling with devastatingly high rents, leaving little for food, medical care, and other necessities. Prop 21 allows local communities to limit their rent increases and preserve affordable housing. It helps seniors and veterans stay in their homes. It protects single-family homeowners. Prop 21 exempts single-family homeowners. If you are not in the rental home business, you will not be affected by Prop 21. It keeps housing costs down. Living paycheck to paycheck makes it difficult for teachers, grocery clerks, and nurses to afford housing in the communities they serve, while still having enough money for basics like groceries, gas, and childcare. Prop 21 allows our communities to preserve affordable housing and encourage the construction of new homes. This will make housing affordable for all. It guarantees landlords a profit. It is fair to mom and pop landlords and renters alike. Yes on Prop 21 is supported by a broad coalition of elected officials, labor unions, civic organizations, national social justice groups, local tenants unions, and legal aid organizations. Prop 21 helps families, children, senior citizens, and veterans stay in their homes. Learn more at yeson21cad.com. From No on Prop 21. Prop 21 is a deeply flawed scheme that will increase housing costs and hurt California's economic recovery. If Prop 21 seems unfair, it's because nearly 60% of Californians voted to reject the same flawed scheme in 2018. Seniors, veterans, and affordable housing experts all oppose Prop 21 because it will make housing less available and less affordable at a time when millions of Californians are struggling to get back to work and keep a roof over their heads. The California Council for Affordable Housing calls Prop 21 a flawed idea. Here's how Prop 21 will make things worse. It repeals housing law with no solution. Prop 21 does nothing to address California's housing shortage. Instead, it undermines the strongest nationwide rent control law in the nation signed by Governor Newsom and enacted just last year with no plan to build affordable and middle-class housing or deal with the increasing problem of homelessness on our streets. It eliminates homeowners' protections. Prop 21 takes away basic protections for homeowners and allows regulators to tell single-family homeowners how much they can charge to rent out a single room. Millions of homeowners will be treated like corporate landlords and subject to regulations and price controls enacted by unelected boards. It reduces home values by up to 20%. Nonpartisan researchers at MIT estimate extreme rent control measures like this result in an average reduction in home values of up to 20%. That's up to $115,000 in lost value for the average homeowner. Californians can't afford to take another hit with the economic collapse threatening their home values and life savings. Prop 21 has no protections for seniors, veterans, or the disabled, and it has no provision to reduce rents. Veterans, seniors, social justice organizations, and the American Legion of the Department of California agree it's the last thing we need right now. Prop 21 allows local governments to establish extreme and permanent regulations on nearly all aspects of housing. For example, even after a tenant moves out, property owners won't be able to establish rents at market rates or pay for investments in repairs or upgrades. It simply goes too far. It makes the housing crisis worse. Californians are experiencing a severe housing affordability crisis and the most devastating economic and public health emergency of our lifetimes. The last thing we should do is pass an initiative that will stop new housing from being built, cost jobs, and hurt the economic recovery. Alice Huffman, president of the California State Conference of the NAACP, says, Prop 21 encourages landlords to evict tenants, and it would result in less rental housing supply, higher housing costs, and more homelessness. It is opposed by a broad bipartisan coalition. Democrats and Republicans agree. It will make the housing crisis worse. Opponents include all of these people. Demand real solutions. Vote no on Prop 21. Some people just won't give up. Unfortunately, my opinion has not changed since 2018, so... Alright, I guess it's back into the time machine, but before we go, I want to note that, for some, this is a hot-button issue. My opinion last time inflamed some people, and I could sense that it got to the point that they were likely soiling themselves as they left their comments. So if this is a trigger issue for you, just skip to Prop 22. Okay, time machine. I believe that rent control is simply not right. That's why it's illegal in many cases. People buy or create rental properties and are entitled to do with their own property as they wish. This is America, not Cuba, not North Korea, not the Soviet Union. Nobody has a constitutional right to live wherever they want at a price they would like to pay. Places grow and change, and that's part of life. Now, I'm not a wealthy guy. I personally have been pushed out of 3 different homes due to skyrocketing rents, and so I moved. It was annoying, and I didn't want to do it, but I did it, and I don't believe that I have a right to force the landlords to keep the rent where I want it just because that works for me. I don't believe in that, and I don't think it's constitutional. Would I enjoy knowing that my landlords couldn't raise my rent beyond what I would like to pay? Yes, but that doesn't make it good or right. The people writing the no position understood that most people don't seem to care about what's constitutional if it is not in their own personal interest. And as a result, they base their argument on the most self-motivated viewpoints on this measure. But think about this. Rent is the paycheck of the landlord. What if the government made a law putting a limit on how much you could charge for your services at work? It's not right. Often people raise the issue of, how will we have maids and gardeners and teachers and whatever? That's not a concern. The laws of economics will correct themselves. If a hotel can't get enough maids, they'll raise the salary of maids, and eventually it'll work out. If you need a gardener, you'll pay what it takes to get someone out to your property. That's the economy. That's what happens. Maybe you want to live somewhere in the heart of Malibu or Monterey. Maybe you live there now and are struggling with the rent. Rather than trying to leverage the arm of government to force people to house you at a price you want to pay, you need to accept that you can't afford to live there anymore. That's what I did. It sucked, but that's life. Someday I will live in my favorite places again, but it's my responsibility to make that happen, not the government's. Moreover, rent control is not without its unintended consequences. I'm not going to spend time here going through everything, but I invite you to research the downsides of rent control. But basically, when you remove the incentive to provide a product or service, landlords improvise, and it's never in the favor of the renters. Plus, the force of the market pushes people looking for homes into other solutions, and that drives up costs elsewhere. This is California. I expect this proposition to pass, but I vote on personal principle and not based on personal comfort. If you have a legitimate philosophical reason for promoting rent control, the Darryl Johnson Show always supports your freedom to vote your conscience. That's the point of this, and that's why I present both angles. If you vote yes on Prop 21, you are voting to expand rent control in California. If you vote no on Prop 21, things will remain as they are, continuing with the recently passed rent control laws. The Darryl Johnson Show says no on Prop 21.